All right, this has been a long time coming, but I think we are ready for the truth. I see you. This one's for you, baby. All right, so my name is Scott Phillip Lewis. All right, I moved down here to Austin, Texas 5 years ago in 2014, and I did not learn about Robert Chodey and his lottery winnings and his whole, beating up a 15-year-old unarmed teenager and settling that whole thing. I didn't learn about all that until July 2019. What began this learning process with Williamson County and what was going on there was the night of January 25th, 2019. I would love to speak freely about what happened that night, but I am still in some legal situation, so I'm going to tread carefully on that. But I will just say, I'm not going to stop until all of the truth comes out. So we got to be patient with that. So I can't talk completely about what led up to the traffic stop, but I will say that there was a traffic stop where Officer Rachel Carter showed up and she started, and there was a traffic stop. She wanted me to do a field sobriety test, and I ended up agreeing to the field sobriety test. But what happened next was the craziest thing ever. I was put in back of a cop car, and I drove about 5 to 7 minutes, and I was sitting in the back after this traffic stop thinking to myself, am I already arrested? What just happened? What's going on? I'm kind of in shock about what's going on as I'm being transported to a different location. At this different location, Officer Rachel Carter starts to give her field sobriety test, and I'm doing my field sobriety test and doing the whole thing. During that, all of a sudden off in the distance, I see a light. It starts as a small light, and as it gets closer, it looked like a spaceship was landing. It was one of the brightest lights I've ever seen in my life. And as it got closer, I realized it was a camera. And my first thought, and I did not even know LivePD existed in Williamson County, but my first thought in my mind was, what the heck, is that LivePD? First, I saw the camera. Second was Grayson Kennedy. Not even part of the traffic stop, not even part of the field sobriety test, just showed up and took over the whole thing. And he started to instigate me, and he really wanted to push my buttons. And I noticed that right away. And I flipped out at first. To the camera, I said, you do not have my permission to put my face on TV. I want to speak to my lawyer. I want to speak to a lawyer. I was anxious. I was very anxious and getting upset that this camera was in my face. I didn't know what was going on. I was just transported to a different location. The whole thing seemed chaotic to me. Eventually, I realized that they wanted to escalate the situation. There were multiple other police officers showing up on the location. And in my heart, I knew I watched Cops a bunch. I don't like LivePD, but I watched Cops back in the day. I felt like they were trying to instigate the situation so they could tase me. And so I kept my composure. I sat there and I took all their verbal abuse and I just said, you're mean. You're mean. You're being mean. You're being mean. You remember that, Mark Luera? I told you I was going to sue you for everything it's worth. Low Bear Defense Solutions. It's weird. It stopped on January 25th, 2019. Did you hear what I was saying? Yeah, okay. So they started to instigate me and they were trying to tase me. That's what they wanted. They wanted me to freak out so they could beat the shit out of me. And I knew that. So I didn't let it happen. And I just sat there and let them do their thing. And then eventually Grayson Kennedy, Lieutenant Kardashian, he put me in the back of the cop car. He didn't read me any of my rights. The whole thing was so manipulated and so effed up. But I was saying to the camera, you don't have my rights to show my face. So I didn't worry about the LivePD thing, but I was arrested, and I felt that I was falsely arrested and didn't didn't get to, it's innocent until proven guilty, okay? And there was no proven guilty. It was just assumed guilty. And that's how looking back at things, that's how Chody rolls. So I get into the jail and I'm still freaking out. There's a camera in my face. I don't feel like I should be there. I didn't know about how scandalous Robert Chody was. And hey, I'm from the Northeast. Like, I'll speak my mind. And I will tell you how I feel. And that's just the way it's going to go. So I wasn't the most compliant in the jail. I can agree with that. But I didn't agree with why I was there. I did not give them my name, and they did not know who I was, but they were still trying to make a scene out of the whole situation. So it turns out I end up in a cell, and the first person I call, I'm a single dude down here in Austin, I called my mom. I said, "Mom, I'm in jail." And her first response was, "I know." The lacrosse team, I coached high school lacrosse. They saw it live on LivePD. So my mom says, I've already seen it. It was on TV. So I was arrested at 6:30, and I was shown on TV at 8 p.m. And what happened next, I had an anxiety attack. I've only had a couple in my life, but I'm not ashamed to say that I suffer from anxiety, depression, and at a time in my life that teetered over into substance abuse issues, alcohol. So she knew that, and I was freaking out, and I was on TV. It was like a Rolodex went through my head of every person that I ever thought of in my life. I swear I could not think about the people that I thought of in that moment again. It was crazy. I freaked out. My mom ended up calling the jail and said that I wasn't doing well. And said that I had anxiety, I had the stuff. She pretty much called and admitted it. So I call her back, and I snapped. I had full-blown anxiety attack where I was going nuts. I started banging on the window of this cell. And the next thing that happened is a bunch of officers gathered around the cell, around the window and the door, and one came in. And he, full Nelson, slammed me down. He put his knee into my back, and my arms were tied behind my back. If you've ever been in the Wilco jail, there's a concrete stair that's going. So my rib was on the concrete stair. He's pushing his knee into my back, and he's pulling his arms as far back as he can, and he's screaming, "Relax, relax." I swear on my life, if I relaxed in that moment, I would have died. Like, the only thing that kept me alive was bracing myself from all this force going through. And I wasn't fighting. I was having an anxiety attack. And so they full Nelson slammed me down, and then they strapped me to an immobilized chair for I don't know how long, but I have to assume it was at least 3-4 hours. My arms and my feet were tied to a chair, and I was put into a room and immobilized. That's how they ended up drawing my blood while I was strapped to an immobilized chair after the takedown. And I wouldn't comply with anything. I didn't want to sign anything with the LivePD. The whole thing was wild to me. I just prayed that I would survive. That's all I was doing while I was sat in that chair. I said the Our Father at least 1,000 times. I repeated it. I just wanted to survive that night. It was the scariest situation I have ever been in my entire life. It was wild. So after that, I get out of jail the next day. I get bailed out because guess what? I'm not a criminal. My background is squeaky clean. I just want to do good for society. That's all I want to do. Period. All right? I'm not perfect, not perfect. I can admit that, but I just want to do good. So I got out and I saw the LivePD episode, and I found out that Sheriff Chody hosted a watch party that night, and I was arrested at 6:30 p.m. And I aired at the beginning of the show on January 25th, 2019 at 8 p.m., an hour and a half later. An hour and a half later, and it was all manipulated. It was all cut up so Grayson Kennedy can look like a good officer. But hey, I know what was going down that night. I know the truth. But it turned out that from that takedown, I broke my shoulder. I had a broken shoulder from the incident of being taken down before I was strapped into the immobilized chair. And I went to the emergency room. I actually got an MRI. It confirmed that my shoulder was broken. So I went back to Williamson County Jail on March 3rd, 2019, and I reported the incident. And 2 officers came to take my call and my complaint. And I do not know the names of those officers, but from looking back and looking at pictures, I am 99.9% sure that I talked to Aaron Skinner and Jeremy Stewart on that day. And I told them what happened. And they took what I said very seriously, and they believed me, and they seemed very concerned, and they told me they would follow up with me. And I found out a week or 2 later that they were fired. And then when I called in to follow up on my complaint, Williamson County gave me nothing. They kept giving me dead ends of voicemail that led to nothing. They tried to cover up the whole thing. So I went back in June and I filed a second complaint. I'm like, I'm not letting this go. Because if you haven't figured it out yet, I see you. I'm not going to let it go. And I told them what happened again. I believe I spoke with Officer Lothorpe of OPS, and he told me he would investigate and follow up. All they did afterwards was send me a sheet of paper that said my claim was not true. It didn't show any evidence, anything that they found, it didn't prove that what I said was not true. They just said not true and thought that they could move on to the next thing. So this was late June. So this is moving into July now of 2019. And at that moment is when I started to research and I found out about Robert Chody beating up the 15-year-old unarmed teenager, and his lottery winnings and everything else that was going on. I also found out about Brian Johns and his whistleblower lawsuit, and my mind was blown. I finally at that moment recognized I was dealing with the most corrupt sheriff in the entire country. The entire country. All right? So now, I'm not mad. I'm not mad at all. It is actually a blessing that it happened to me because I can shoulder all of this. I am so secure with who I am and the issues that I've had in my past, and I just want to make the world a better place. So guess what? Come at me. The truth is gonna come. Robert, I am not afraid of you, buddy. I am not afraid.